What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. The best endings feel like they're answering a question raised at the start. Look back at your first chapter. What tension or theme did you introduce? Bring that full circle. A great ending feels inevitable in hindsight, even if it's surprising in the moment. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. Endings are hard. You've spent so much time building your world, raising the stakes, developing your characters, and now it's time to land the plane. And that can feel overwhelming because a strong ending doesn't just wrap things up, it resonates. It circles back to what's come before. It's the culmination of all the tensions you've built, and it leaves the reader carrying something long after the final page. But how do you do that without your ending feeling too neat, too vague, or too abrupt? That's what we're diving into today. In this episode, you'll learn 4 common mistakes writers make with their endings, 5 different types of story endings, and tips to revise an ending that's not quite landing. If you're stuck or second-guessing how to close your story, this episode is for you. Let's start with what doesn't work. Here are 4 common mistakes I see in story endings. Mistake number 1, rushing the ending. Writers spend 300 pages building tension and then race through the final scenes. And the result is an ending that feels abrupt, unearned, and emotionally flat. Mistake number 2 is tying everything up too neatly. This happens a lot with stories that have too many story threads. The character is battling multiple internal struggles and multiple external conflicts, so there isn't a clear through line, and then every single thread at the end is tied up in a neat little bow. Everything is resolved. Everyone is happy. There's no ambiguity. But real life isn't that neat, and neither should your story's ending be. Great endings leave a little ambiguity, a sense that the characters' lives will continue beyond the last page. Mistake number 3 is introducing something new too late. If a major twist, character, or theme shows up out of the blue or too close to the end, it feels disconnected. Your ending should grow organically from what's already been planted. And mistake number 4, there's no emotional payoff. Plot mechanics might resolve, but if we don't feel anything, the ending feels flat. A strong ending must connect to your character's internal journey, their transformation. Okay, now let's look at 5 different ways your story might close. Ending number 1 is the broken victory. The character wins or gets what he wants, but at a cost. There's both gain and loss. The character gets what he wants, but loses something he deeply cares about. The character is forced to make an impossible choice. For example, a relationship is saved, but trust is broken. In Little Fires Everywhere, truths come to light, but relationships fracture. Another example, Andre Dubus's A Father Story. When Luke's daughter Jennifer comes to his house at 2 a.m., confessing that she just hit a young man with her car on her way back from a party, Luke goes to the scene and finds the boy dead on the side of the road. He decides to protect his daughter by covering up all the evidence of her guilt, ensuring she avoids legal consequences. Now, he's a father, so leaving the boy on the side of the road is an excruciating choice. What he gains is a renewed bond with his daughter. They now have this shared secret. But here's where things get complicated. He's also a devout Catholic. His best friend is a priest. He prays every day. His decision to hide his daughter's hit-and-run accident conflicts with his religious principles. He grapples with guilt, acknowledging that he loves his daughter more than he loves truth, leading to an internal moral crisis and profound spiritual dissonance. At the end, he tells God he would do it again because he's a father. So it's an impossible choice. He gains something valuable to him, his daughter, but he's forced to give up something else, his spiritual peace and well-being. With this type of ending, the protagonist reaches a resolution, but it comes at a real cost. For example, she might achieve what she set out to do, or even something better, but not without sacrifice. Maybe a relationship is healed, but only after another is broken. Maybe he finds peace, but not justice. Maybe he chooses freedom, but has to leave something or someone behind. This type of ending often carries a sense of both resolution and sacrifice. It's a broken victory. Okay, on to ending number 2, with a hard truth. With this ending, the character doesn't get what he wants, but he gains painful self-awareness or moral reckoning. A harsh truth the character spent the whole novel avoiding. For example, I think of Tom Perrotta's novel, Little Children. At the end of the novel, Sarah doesn't just lose the fantasy of running away with Todd. She's forced to see herself clearly, and it is painful. She realizes she hasn't just been dissatisfied with her life, she's also been failing her young daughter. Caught up in her own restlessness and longing, she's been emotionally absent as a mother. That realization is the true cost of her journey. She doesn't get a clean escape or a dramatic reinvention. Instead, she has to return to her life, to the husband she despises. And maybe after the last page, she'll find a healthier way out of that marriage. But at least we know she's going to be a more present mother. It's a hard-earned truth. There's no triumph, just brutal clarity. With this type of ending, the reader knows all along that the character is making bad or foolish choices, and we suspect that the protagonist will not get what they want by the end. There's a lot of self-deception and desperation involved, so the clues are all there. But the character must come to some moral reckoning by the end to make this journey worthwhile, to the character and the reader. Okay. On to ending number 3, the redemptive ending. With this ending, a flawed or wounded character finds a way back to integrity, healing, or hope. A character may have stumbled morally, emotionally, or relationally. Sometimes a character has done harm, either to others, to themselves, or both. This character has made choices he regrets, crossed moral lines, or failed to live up to his own values. And now by the end of the story, this character is seeking to make things right. But redemption doesn't mean a clean slate. It's not about being redeemed by others. It's about the character choosing to act or think differently. Redemption in storytelling isn't only about atoning for sins. At its heart, redemption is about restoring something that was broken. Something that was broken, lost, or devalued, whether that's trust, dignity, hope, self-worth, or a sense of meaning. It's about reclaiming something essential that was damaged by the character's own actions or by forces outside of his control. So sometimes the character has made harmful choices and needs to atone, but other times redemption is about healing from suffering the character didn't cause. Characters who grew up in neglect or survived abuse, endured illness, or faced oppression can have incredibly powerful redemptive arcs. In these stories, the redemption is often about reclaiming their voice, restoring their sense of worth, finding new purpose after devastation, breaking cycles they were born into, learning to forgive themselves for simply surviving. So it's about choosing to live, grow, hope, or belong again, even when the world made them believe they couldn't. For example, in the memoir Educated by Tara Westover, the redemption isn't about bad choices she made. It's about escaping the narrow, secluded, and abusive world she was raised in and claiming her right to learn, to think for herself, and to be free. In Wild by Cheryl Strayed, her redemption is about grieving her mother's death and forgiving herself for the ways she self-destructed afterward. It's about reclaiming her life. In The Color Purple by Alice Walker, Celia's redemption is in reclaiming her voice and sense of worth after a lifetime of abuse and oppression. Redemption endings are powerful because they remind us that change is possible even after failure or tragedy. They show us that brokenness and growth can coexist. Okay, on to ending number 4, the tragic ending. The story ends in loss, failure, or death, but what remains is meaning. So there's meaning extracted from the tragedy. In these endings, the protagonist might fail. They might die. A relationship may be destroyed. But the story leaves us with something powerful, a deeper understanding of what was at stake all along. This kind of ending is often more emotionally challenging for both writer and reader, but it's also among the most unforgettable. Tragic endings work because, well, first, they reflect reality. Not all stories end in triumph. They often leave a lasting emotional impact, and they can deepen the meaning of everything that came before. Tragic endings can be especially effective when the story has been building toward a fatal flaw, a moral reckoning, or an inevitable consequence. The loss at the end often forces the reader to re-examine earlier moments in the story with new gravity. But the reader should feel the loss matters. For example, in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, the lovers die, but their deaths force their feuding families to reckon with the cost of hatred. In David Nicholls' novel, One Day, the loss comes after a long-awaited fulfillment. Throughout the novel, Emma and Dexter orbit one another over the course of 2 decades. They drift apart, they come back together, they struggle through personal failures and relationships with other people. but their bond remains central. When they finally become a couple, it feels like a well-earned, long-awaited payoff. Then Emma dies in a biking accident. And just like that, their shared future is gone. And for the reader, it's devastating because we've waited so long for them to finally get their timing right. And it forces Dexter and us to reflect. The rest of the book, and especially the final chapters, shift into Dexter's grief. We see him unravel, then gradually begin to rebuild. In the final scenes, he revisits key places from their shared history, now infused with loss. The tragedy forces a reckoning, not just with Emma's absence, but with who Dexter has become. The final scene isn't hopeless, but it's deeply bittersweet. He's no longer self-destructing. He's clearly grown and dealt with his grief. His grief has turned into gratitude for the woman he lost. This ending has Dexter and us reliving the first day they met, but giving us a piece of that day we hadn't experienced at the beginning. It's a part of their beginning that was withheld from the reader. So the ending goes back to their first day together. It's healing for him, but it's gut-wrenching for us. Okay, last one. Ending number 5, the cliffhanger. In a cliffhanger ending, the central conflict may not be fully resolved, or a brand new twist might be introduced just before the final page. This type of ending leaves readers on the edge of their seats, eager or desperate to know what happens next. A cliffhanger doesn't offer closure. Instead, it builds anticipation, often by ending with a decision, a revelation, or an unanswered question. When done well, a cliffhanger keeps the momentum going. Readers have to pick up the next book or watch the next episode, and it builds stakes by holding back resolution. But here's the key. Even if the plot is left open-ended, the story still needs to feel cohesive. Something must be fulfilled emotionally or thematically by the end of this installment, even if the larger arc is unresolved. The cliffhanger ending is best for series fiction, especially sci-fi, fantasy, thrillers, or any series-based storytelling. These are usually stories that rely heavily on suspense or high-stakes plot lines. So these are narrative arcs that span multiple books or episodes. For example, in Book 1 of The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, Katniss and Peeta survive the games, but the way they outsmart the Capitol has consequences. The personal victory feels immediate, but the political war has only just begun. The ending leaves us asking, what happens now? In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the book ends with a devastating loss and a promise of what's to come. We don't know how Harry will defeat Voldemort, but we know he's about to try. Now, not all cliffhanger endings lead to another novel. An example of this is the novel Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. It's not a part of a series, but the novel ends with a psychological cliffhanger. The external mystery is solved, but the deeper question, can this toxic marriage survive, is left deliberately unsettled. Very effective. When writing a cliffhanger, end on a moment of high tension, a decision, reveal, or a new threat. Let the reader feel something has shifted, even if not resolved. Make sure the story delivers enough emotional payoff to feel complete, even without a full resolution. Cliffhangers are powerful, but they're a promise. If you leave your reader hanging, you need to deliver what comes next. Use them with intention, and you'll not only keep the reader engaged, you'll keep them coming back. Okay, so we talked about 5 different ways to close your story and how each one shapes the emotional impact your story leaves behind. Number 1, the broken victory ending. This is where the character gains something they were chasing, but at a real emotional cost. Ending number 2, with a hard truth. This is where the character loses what they thought they wanted, but gains painful self-knowledge or moral clarity. Number 3, the redemptive ending. This is where a character who has stumbled, failed, or experienced tragedy finds a path back toward integrity, healing, or forgiveness. Number 4, the tragic ending. The story ends in loss or death, but what remains is a deeper meaning, a truth or emotion that the characters and the reader are left to carry. And number 5, the cliffhanger ending. The story closes with a question, a revelation, or an unresolved thread that leaves the reader breathless, unsettled, and desperate to know what happens next. Each of these endings carries its own emotional weight, and when chosen intentionally, they don't just end the story, they transform it, leaving your reader with something to feel, to wonder about, and to carry with them long after the final page. Okay, here are 4 tips for closing your story. Number 1, echo the beginning. The best endings feel like they're answering a question raised at the start. Look back at your first chapter. What tension or theme did you introduce? Bring that full circle. A great ending feels inevitable in hindsight, even if it's surprising in the moment. So lay the emotional groundwork early. Seed the character's internal conflict and let the ending be the place it finally resolves, for better or for worse. Tip number 2, let go of the need to explain everything at the end. Trust the reader to fill in what's inferred. Some ambiguity is powerful. In fact, ambiguity can be one of your greatest tools when crafting your ending. Tip number 3, focus on emotional closure, not just plot. Your story's external events might be wrapped up, but the real payoff comes from emotional truth. Has your character changed? Has something shifted internally? And tip number 4, make it linger. A powerful final image, sentence, or emotional beat can elevate your ending. It's what sticks in the reader's mind. As you shape your story's ending, remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being true. True to your character's journey. True to the emotional cost of change. Remember, even after the final page, the story still lives on in the heart of your reader. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.